genre.
It may be time, dears. This is Beyond Geek By Night, where we will be discussing each episode of the Geek By Night podcast leading up to the series finale. On today's episode, we will be discussing the 29th episode, A Matter of Time. I've already listened to all the episodes, and you haven't, but now you're almost caught up, so let's break this episode open. We're about to go Beyond Geek By Night. I'm your host, Matt Bennett. And here is our awesome panel. I'm joined today by creator and executive producer Scott Carelli.
Hi.
Executive producer Nick Jimenez.
Hi, thanks for doing this, Matt.
And voice of Gretchen West and casting director Chelsi Kern.
Hey.
Just as a recap, in this episode, A Matter of Time, we begin where Friends and Enemies left off. Gretchen appears and takes Elliot's hand. For clarity, this Elliot, the one that has gone back in time 9 months, is going to be Elliot 1. Elliot 2 is our Elliot, who we saw throughout the series. Elliot 1 goes to Gretchen just moments after the last time he saw her, the day after the Swift Industries explosion. She is shocked to learn the details of the mysterious appearance, and they soon brief Lorelei, whom Elliot 2 has not met yet. We relive the season through the eyes of Gretchen, who has been hidden away with Elliot 1 the entire time. We learn that Elliot is the catalyst for Lorelei approaching the underdogs to train them at the end of the reboot story arc. Soon after, Gretchen is present for Victor's transformation in the Status Quo episodes, and she herself gains powers, the ability to manipulate time. She helps Lorelei to quickly read through the Liberty Saga during the events of the Fandom Menace. During this time, Elliot 1, the Elliot who came back in time, develops his powers and learns that pheromones were just part of his true abilities, the power to control people's emotions. During the events of Ghost Story, Gretchen accidentally appears to Elliot 2, making him think that she was a ghost and, in fact, dead. Elliot 1 and Gretchen learn to make do with their situation, and soon they propose to each other. As the events of Friends and Enemies transpire, Gretchen saves Joel Vickers from being shot by the Devil's Advocates, and Elliot reveals himself to Joel. It's finally time. Gretchen appears to Elliot 2 and sends him back in time 9 months, thus turning him into Elliot 1, who appears for the rest of the group fully healed and equipped with 9 months of honing his powers. The gang is all back together again, and they go with Lorelei to have dinner, a moment of peace with the threat of Dr. Medina and Charlotte Swift looming. All right.
Nice.
I'm suddenly having deep regrets over not calling the episode 9 months.
Oh.
Listening to this again, I'm remembering just how much housekeeping is done in this episode. There's just so many significant story points that are scrunched down into a single episode. That it really made the most sense for me to kind of think of where they line up with episodes previous in the season, since we're sort of reliving everything from another perspective. Was that the format that you two imagined the whole time when you were coming up with this episode, that sort of linear reliving of the season up to this point?
Yeah?
Yes.
Yeah.
I want to say this was very much like the Prestige, or like the whole episode is kind of one long reward, where we're finally like, here we go. Here's the context. Here's placing Gretchen in the whole season, in the way that we kind of knew from the beginning. Part of that big season long plan that Scott Cass and I had was that we would kind of pull a Game of Thrones type move where Friends and Enemies, the penultimate episode of the season, would be the big epic confrontation episode, and this one, Another Life, or A Matter of Time, geez Louise, could be a way of just resetting the board and getting everyone on the same page, where now the show and the audience are finally caught up.
Yeah, so he actually made a slip up that's important, and I think he made the slip up and then forgot, I think, the context of the slip up. This was never intended to be the season finale. This was
great, cool.
This was the prologue to the season finale.
Yes, that's exact. Yeah, I remember Scott and I both listened to it almost simultaneously this morning, and when I got to the end of it, I'm like, wow, this is a weird I don't think this is a weird finale.
Yeah, it wasn't intended to be the finale. It was intended to be like our finale was going to be, I think, 6 parts with a prologue and an epilogue. And
Sounds like us.
This was going to be the prologue. And we wrote 2 parts of the season finale, two out of 6 plus the epilogue. And it just wasn't working. And
it included everything from like Lorelai taking some of the group out on a bachelor party.
Yeah. Yeah. There was a lot of stuff in it that was, the original intention for the finale. It was kind of like the original intention for the finale was meant to be like a big wedding annual, like in comics, when like 2 superheroes like get married and, chaos ensues. And that was the original intention. It was called Another Life. And this episode was called Another Life Prologue. When Another Life started falling apart in terms of like just creatively, in terms of like we didn't really like the direction that it was going, and we were having trouble with like coordinating schedules like between us and like everything else that was going on. I was in grad school and was like finishing up like my whole like master's degree and like all of this. So there was like a lot going on, and I would have cheated in the past by making episodes of this show be schoolwork. I would be like, I would be in a screenwriting class and I'd be like, hey, so I'm just going to write the finale to this. And they'd be like, yeah, all right, whatever. And so I would, and I'd get an A, not to brag, but,
I'm glad you got something out of all this.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. So when all of this started falling apart between just like us creatively not feeling it, feeling the direction and everything else going on in our personal lives, we ended up sort of deciding like, okay, well, we have to at least release this episode because we thought that it felt like, okay, instead of a prologue to the season finale, it can be the epilogue to season 1. So really, Friends and Enemies is the season finale, and this is just sort of like an epilogue. This isn't really the finale. It's sort of like for you, for those of you who watch Buffy, it's like the season 4 finale of Buffy is the Adam stuff, and then there's that weird episode where they all have those dreams. That's what this felt like to me. It's like more of an epilogue than a real proper finale. But we just didn't have any other choice because Another Life wasn't working the way that we wanted it to, and it was taking forever to write because of our schedules. And so we ended up having to put it on the back burner, and that led to the big break between this and the next episode you guys are going to hear next week, and then the massive break between that episode and the episodes you'll start hearing on October 4th.
Yeah, starting with the new normal.
Right.
And wrapping up listening to A Matter of Time, it suddenly made me very grateful that we did rally and do the Christmas episode.
Yeah.
Because I think it becomes a very helpful stepping stone, because everyone is in like wow, to go from listening to this to imagining listening to New Normal in October.
Yeah.
It's like, whoa, geez Louise.
Yeah. But we'll talk about the Christmas special next time.
Yeah.
On the next
I'm excited.
On the next Beyond. But yeah, this episode, I think it works really well as an epilogue. I don't think it was never intended to be a finale, but I think it really works as an epilogue, and I think it really works as a showcase for Gretchen as a character and our sort of exploration of her, who, we've just been we've just had on ice all season. And so it was really fulfilling to finally figure her character out and give Chelsi something to do other than casting other people in roles that she doesn't get to play.
Which is fun, but
yeah, I know. But it felt like I was just like you were like a dog, and I just kept handing you meat and telling you to hand it to another dog. Like, you can't eat it. Give it to this other one.
Yeah, or like, from a coaching standpoint, it's almost like from a character place and an actor place, it's like having this really great player on the bench.
Yeah.
And you just are like, I know you want to go out there. I know like you would be doing good out there, but like we have a plan.
Yeah.
We need you coming out in the 4th quarter.
Yeah.
So because it was all reward, as you say, and you had this vision of what it would look like for Gretchen to come off ice, so to speak, was the episode easy to write because of that?
I remember this one falling together like butter.
Yeah. So every once in a while, this really cool thing happens with Scott and Cass and I's process, where all of the toil and hours and work that we get, and every once in a while, just kind of things fall into place. We're like, oh, because we worked so hard to make everything match up while we were doing this season. This is kind of just showing our hand.
If I remember correctly, I think we were having schedule conflicts to break this episode. And we had we had broken Another Life, the original,
the wedding annual.
Yeah. The wedding annual, the original intention for the finale. And so we had broken that episode into like basics of like, okay, this basically happens in part 1, part 2, part 3, etc. And I remember we were like, okay, now we need to like, actually like sit down and like break like scene by scene like we normally do with this first episode. And I remember it struggling getting that on the table and me knowing that we had to do it. So I was like, well, let me just see what I can do by myself. And I think I just like straight up broke the whole thing.
Yeah.
And I was like, I just wrote the outline and then sent it to you and you were like, whoa. And then, and then we wrote it from there. And I just remember you being like, that was like one of the easiest things I've ever written because it was like, it was just all there and it was really easy. And I think my outline even had bits from the other episodes where I had like copy pasted them from other scripts in there so that he knew exactly where he was when he was doing the first draft.
Yeah. And it's the math all checks out, thankfully.
Yeah.
So, the thing like, Gretchen would be here already when Victor gets her powers or when Joel gets attacked by the Devil's Advocates. And so we had so much room to the episode has so much breadth and we can do fun things like, Lorelai binging the Liberty Saga books, or just like the weird kind of getting to sit and live with Elliot and Gretchen's discomfort and Gretchen's, dissatisfaction. And
this episode hits differently in quarantine.
I was going to say, Gretchen was really ahead of the curve.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Binging Friday Night Lights and The Wire like the rest of us.
Yes, definitely. So that was a lot of fun, and getting to highlight Chelsi and Gretchen, and Gretchen's by design. Like I don't know, like fun getting to live with this character and just focus on her and get her perspective on stuff was fun.
Is this story something that existed in the first iteration of Geek by Night? Like at this point in the season, are you still kind of resolving beats that have been in your head for a long time, or have we really surpassed that point by now?
Well, what's funny is the only bit of the Gretchen story that was introduced in the original series, as was produced, was there is a bit in episode 4 or 5.
The yellow mustard.
Is it that yellow mustard? Okay, so in episode 5, where Gwen gets a job at the shop and Gibson gives her a name tag, and she's like, "Who's Gretchen?" And then in episode 10,
the law of attraction.
The law of attraction. Elliot reveals that he was once married, or not quite married.
He was betrothed.
He was betrothed, and that his fiance never showed up to meet him at the altar.
Left him at the altar.
Yeah, and that was Gretchen. And so this was always the intention for that twist, was that she had time travel powers, and it was like a whole, or no, not that she had time travel powers, that
travel happens.
Time travel happens, but the point was that Elliot was always going to be responsible for stealing his own wife. That was always the thing. Because there was something that I thought was really funny about that. Just like the idea of like,
why did this happen to me?
He was like being really upset that this happened to him. And in reality, he did it to himself. And I just thought that was really amusing. But we never got to pay that off in the original series. So we just we both started earlier and ended earlier in this version because we're better writers now than I was back then. But yeah, it was always the intention though for Gretchen.
In a similar way to where Billy was always going to betray Max and be like a secret threat, a phantom menace, if you will.
Right.
that we like, oh, okay, we never got to resolve that, and then we never got to do the Gretchen time travel thing. So let's also, throw that in there.
Man, we could have called Friends and Enemies the Phantom Menace. I kind of wish we had.
Definitely.
Whoops.
So, Chelsi, I got to ask you, this episode is basically all Gretchen and Elliot. What was the recording process like?
I think this was the last time that I got to record with Scott. So we recorded at Scott's house, and it was quite a fun time. I'm trying to think of some of the silly things that I had to do, like when Gretchen is like running on the treadmill. I literally like ran outside of Scott's apartment and ran up the stairs and down back and was just like running laps so that I could sound like I was out of breath. And what else? There was one point when Gwen hugs me and I say, "Oh, big hugs." Scott had to literally like hug me because I was not getting it right. And every time I did the line, he was like, "No, you got to do it like this." And finally he was just like, "All right, just, can I hug you?" And I was like, "Yes, that's fine." And then we got it. We got the line just right. But the recording process was intense. It was obviously the longest I had ever done, but it was still a lot of fun and I really enjoyed it. There were parts that were really difficult, like getting the scream when the particles explode and all of that, because I suck at sound effects like that and making the like grunting and those kind of things. But yeah, it was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed the process, and it was fun to finally be able to do a lot more than just a couple of lines. And yeah, it was fun. And I think really fondly of when Scott and I were able to record together, because it was just a much more fun process for me and my perfectionist brain to be able to just have the director sitting next to me saying like what's good and what's not. But yeah, it was a lot of fun.
That's cool. So now that we know Gretchen a little more and we know her powers and all of that, I have to ask, is Gretchen the sixth underdog? Or if we count Victor the seventh, or the eighth if we count Lorelai, or the ninth if we count Joel? Like, can we expect her to be running with the rest of the gang from here?
I think that's part of the story in season 2. And it's a part of, because the thing that you have to think about with Gretchen is that like she doesn't know any of these people. She only knows Elliot and Lorelai, and Lorelai only because of this,
and Gwen.
Oh yeah, and Gwen because they were friends before. But she hasn't even seen her in like 9 months. So there's that. But so I think that's like kind of part of her struggle, and I think that we do some interesting things with her, especially in the back half of season 2, which Chelsi doesn't know about yet. But because we haven't gotten there, we're currently working on her directorial debut script.
Yeah.
Because she's directing a couple of episodes next season.
The assassination of Jeffrey Gibson.
Yeah, right.
William Medina.
I'm really excited about I don't know, just being able to really explore Gretchen as a character, because it's kind of like a new toy, because she wasn't in the old show, and so trying to explore like, okay, well, what's a different kind of character that fits into this? And then also allowing ourselves to sort of explore the idea that maybe she doesn't quite fit in with everyone else and what that would mean. And the sort of tension that comes from that, especially for a couple. One who is very attached to these people, and one who is like, I barely know these people, except for Gwen.
Yeah, we return back again and again to how the show is sort of us dealing with our own personal issues of getting out of our 20s and into our 30s, sort of out of the extended adolescence that is afforded to those, or that comes with those that are able to like have like college years, you know?
Yeah.
And friend groups are so important when you're in your like early to mid 20s, and then this weird transition thing starts to happen where you're like, wait, who do I want to be around in my life? What's my actual connection to these people?
Right.
Is it just because they're friends with my boyfriend? Am I cool with that?
Right.
Who am I?
Right.
And so I remember so oftentimes, because she was away from everyone for so long, when we came to Gretchen, we were like, oh, wow, I don't know. I'm still figuring out who this character is in the way that I could just like, oh, Simon in a zoo. I know how to write that.
Right. Sure.
Like Mindy goes to get groceries. Great. I can pump out 10 pages like that.
Right.
But who's Gretchen?
Right.
And so instead of like, I think by giving that to the character, it made writing her possible.
Yeah.
Of like, well, what if she's going through an identity crisis too? The way that we're trying to write her.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Whenever we struggle with the character, we just think metatextually, and something usually comes out of that. So.
But yeah, so it'll be interesting seeing her play out in season 2.
So it sounds like, Chelsi, you don't know a lot about Gretchen's story in the next season, but did you know about Gretchen's story in A Matter of Time, with all the payoff that this led to?
No, because Scott never let me know. He was always avoiding spoilers with me, so I was never allowed to know things.
Yeah, you didn't need to know, though. And honestly, if you knew, it probably would have affected your performance in episode 5.
It might have.
And I didn't want that. So, I needed it to be genuine, and I thought that the best way for that to happen was if you didn't know anything and just literally thought you were a ghost or dead or evil, as the post tag seems to suggest.
Yeah.
I just thought it would be better for your performance if you didn't have to deal with all these layers before I had even written the layers. Because like, it's one thing for me to tell you, it's another thing for you to read it and experience it as the character.
Right.
And I just thought it would be best for your performance if you only knew the bare minimum.
That's fair.
Yeah. I think
we're going to negotiate season 2, though. I want to know more.
well. Oh man, wait till you read the script that you're getting to direct. It's gonna blow your mind.
Oh, I'm so excited.
Yeah, it's been a lot of, and that was another. I mean, not to talk about the Christmas episode, but
yeah, you keep wanting to talk about the Christmas.
I didn't know we were doing an episode about it. That's fine.
Oh yeah, of course we are.
Yeah, it happened.
It's an episode. Yeah. It's episode 30. Anyway.
So obviously Gretchen gets a lot of development in this episode, but we also see Elliot hone his powers and go through quite a bit in his 9 months as well. In particular, I found it interesting that right around the time that Gretchen comes back into his life, his powers evolve from pheromones to attract people to him into more control over people's emotions. I thought of it as kind of the opposite of Gretchen getting fridged. Like, now that she's back in his life, he develops more. Was this kind of in your pocket as well for Elliot? Because he goes through a pretty big transformation here with what he used to know compared to this revelation.
I think his evolution is just sort of a part of us. Our overarching desire to evolve everyone's powers to a certain extent, because we think that, in terms of like these powers happening, and we think of it in terms of like, working out or whatever physical attribute. It's like the way that we can like kind of connect our brains to it is that it would start off as just sort of like a basic thing. Okay, I can lift 50 pounds, whatever. But then the more you work at it, the stronger that you're going to get, and the more things that you're going to be able to do. I can run. I can run 3 miles before getting out of breath. Whatever it is, or
when you're like doing something incredible, like climbing a mountain.
Yeah,
it
wasn't overnight. It wasn't like, I woke up and decided to climb a goddamn mountain.
I'm using the things that I learned doing other stuff that is now helping me climb this mountain.
Right. So like we always knew that we wanted the initial powers to be sort of, low power level and sort of on an extreme side of things. So like it was like an instantaneous like, whoa, what is that? And then we wanted to evolve those into like more subtle control over things that feel part and parcel with what they're in control of in the beginning. And so with Elliot, you know, and you saw that with Simon in the last episode.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
And how his powers sort of evolved.
What you can accomplish when you don't have a life.
Right. and Elliot has no life right now. So, you know, he's obviously his powers are going to evolve. And so we had to think about like, okay, his powers have always been that, you know, he had pheromones or whatever, or what we thought were pheromones or whatever. And, we were like, well, what is that really? What is he really doing? If we break it down to like the base essentials, what is he doing? And it's like, oh, well, he's controlling the emotions of these women. He's making them fall for him. And what started off as an extreme, like almost mob mentality by episodes, by the 6th story arc, it had evolved into like kind of just like a crush vibe that was an obsession, but not like I'm going to either you're going to have sex with me or I'm going to like tear your arms off. That was happening in like the first.
He was able to graduate into like the squirrel from the Sorcerer's Apprentice.
Right. It was like more of just like a subtle thing. And so
patient, if you will.
Yeah. So we're just like kind of like, well, what is that? What is that? And we just thought it's
like changing the chemicals in your that make your emotions happen.
Right.
He's able to manipulate that. And
right.
Control it.
Yeah. And so that's what we decided with him but that didn't happen until we got to this episode. It wasn't, we just sort of like looked back at what we had done and decided like, oh, that makes the most sense for him as far as how his powers would evolve. And now since then we've talked about the other characters and how their powers are going to evolve. And so we kind of know that as well.
It's kind of become a very useful tool as we've gone through season 2 is whenever we're stuck or whenever we're trying to figure out where to go next, we look at the tools that we already have.
Yeah.
We look at what's already on the board.
Yeah.
Instead of pulling stuff out of our imaginations.
Yeah.
And we're like, okay, well, let's look at Elliot. What have we seen so far? What has he done? Okay. The pheromone stuff, okay, well, let's boil that down. Let's look at it. And I think what's cool about season 2 is we get to do that with different characters and explore different parts of these abilities that we've given them. And how can we enrich in that?
Yeah.
That might be a word.
Yeah, for sure.
So after seeing the powers of a few underdogs develop, is it safe to assume that we're going to see powers of some overachievers or antagonists develop further?
Yes. I think that's fair.
That's something that we've been having a lot of fun with.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think there's a little bit of that in the episode we're writing right now.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Cool.
Nice.
Awesome. In terms of episode format, this episode is obviously very different. It's kind of a story arc in and of itself, but it's pretty high concept. There's kind of a very specific goal with this episode. Is that something that we can expect with the new format of season 2 having like single episode story arcs, I guess?
Yeah, this is the ongoing format for the rest of it, because we have this followed by the Christmas special, which is a single episode, and then or holiday special, and then the all of season 2, everything is like one part episode, sort of like self-contained. Everything except for the finale. The actual series finale is a 2-parter. But yeah, everything else are single episodes, but they all build on each other in a way that is more serialized, I would say, than season 1. And season 1 was pretty serialized, but the episodic nature of season 1 isn't, or I guess like the story arc thing. It's like we're telling one giant story arc instead of multiple, 4-part story arcs. Yeah. But then within that story arc, that larger story arc, each episode has its own identity, I think. So.
Well, it's a good thing we have an after show for people to listen to help them get all caught up on the season.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Are there any other thoughts about this awesome episode, A Matter of Time, that anybody wants to chime in?
We got some top tier Naomi Wong in this episode.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
As she binges through the Liberty books. And
I think my favorite part of this episode, my favorite part was like figuring out Gretchen, because it was like really important that we like nailed that. But I really did like the fun of going back to those old episodes and explaining stuff that you didn't know needed explaining before this episode. Things like her reading the Liberty Saga books. Because like when you are listening to the third story arc, The Phantom Menace, you're just sort of like, oh yeah, she's really smart, so she must read really fast. But then we backdoor reveal like, oh, actually, she can't really read that fast. She had a little help, and then the ghost story stuff happening, I think, was the way that her like obsession with Halloween was seeded into her by Elliot. I think was a lot of fun. It was just like finding all of those little moments throughout, I think, was a lot of fun to write.
One of my favorite horror movies is Insidious Chapter 2 because it's kind of like a Back to the Future Part 2 for Insidious. And there's this part where Lynn Shay sees something happening in the first movie, and she kind of turns to the camera and goes, "So that's how that happened." And it's kind of the vibe we were going for with this.
Oh, okay. I would say that's the vibe you're going for. But
yeah, sure. Yeah, I often have my own machinations when we write these.
Just like your secret F-bombs in every script.
Yeah, that I hide for you.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Have we told that story that he writes?
I don't think so.
No.
This is news to me.
So our process is that we break the episode together. I write a super detailed outline of like breaking down everything that happens. He writes the first draft, and then I rewrite him. And then we go back and forth a couple of times, and then that's the script that goes out. And I write this outline, sometimes it has like a little dialogue or like soft dialogue, as I'd call it, where it's like, this is what I kind of want, but write it better, Nick, that kind of thing. And so when I get the first draft from him, every single script he's ever sent me, every single one has one F-bomb somewhere in the script that he just has a character say, and I have to find it and figure out a way to get rid of it. But it's every time. And one time he did it, and we kept it in. And it was Victor, and we had him bleep himself, which we thought was pretty funny.
And even call
but
it
that's
out,
the only time it's ever been kept in the script. Was that time because we could write it. We could keep it in, but still write it out. Yeah. But yeah, every script he ever sends me, there's always at least one F-bomb. It's like his little game with me.
That's amazing.
It's like Phantom Thread.
Is it?
Where there's like a stitch.
Stitched in.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Oh, and then I don't know, some really good Gibson stuff. I don't know. I like the moment where Gibson met Gretchen. It was kind of like when Ray and Poe met at the end of Last
We haven't even met
Jedi.
yet. Yeah.
That's actually one of my favorite. I don't know why. I think it's because it's the moment that reminds me the most of like Chelsi, because like Chelsi and Gretchen aren't that similar, really. They both kind of have mom vibes, but like that's about it. Otherwise, I think the characters are very different. The character of Chelsi Kern and the character of Gretchen. But there's one moment where like Chelsi comes through, and it's the moment where there's two. The moment where I had to hug her to get that moment of like, whoa, big hugs. That was very much Chelsi, and what I wanted and why I had to like physically hug her. But the moment when Gibson says like, I haven't even met her. I'm Gibson, by the way. And she just goes, hi. It's like, I don't know what it is about that thing, but it always makes me smile because I just think of Chelsi and it makes me happy.
How do you know Lorelai?
Yeah.
Some great Chris
That's
O'Connor.
really good. Really good Joel stuff in this.
Oh, I love the Joel.
Yes.
Man, yeah. The sound effect of him like leaping out of the gunfire is just so satisfying to me.
Yeah. The Joel stuff is really good in this. And I will have to say, we talked about him a little bit, but like Matt Mazel, like he had to go through a lot this season, and he did like a really good job with all of it. But he had to go through like an entire season long arc in this one episode.
Yeah.
And he nailed it. I mean, he's amazing in this, I think.
Oh, absolutely.
It's one thing like Chelsi like had to basically create a character in this episode while also maintaining consistency with like the half a character we gave her earlier in the season. And she did a really great job with that. but just like Matt was like, I was like re-listening to this. I think at the time when I was producing it and editing it and everything, I was just so absorbed in getting the episode out that it never occurred to me just how good he was. And then re-listening to this, I was like, wow, he's really good. He has to play so many things. And he has to do some like kind of bad guy stuff, but like you never feel like he's like doing, he's a bad guy.
You know why. Yeah.
You know why, and you empathize with him. It's kind of amazing what he's able to pull off in this episode. Just
absolutely.
What an incredible performance. And you guys are so good together. And I'm just I'm really happy with the show, and I love everybody involved.
just to bring it back full circle.
Yeah, no, indeed.
And I'm really excited about the Elliot Gretchen stuff coming in season 2.
Yeah, there's some good stuff coming.
So are we. That's going to be awesome. Okay. Well, I guess it was only a matter of time before we ran out of stuff to talk about. I've been waiting since 2 minutes in. I've been waiting to say that. I want to say thank you again to our guests, Scott, Nick, and Chelsi, for joining me today, and thank you to all of you, the fans, the underdogs, for listening. If you'd like to support the show, as always, please join the Dueling Genre Patreon at duelinggenre.com/support. You can also tell your friends, families, and followers to subscribe to Geek by Night on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever else you get your podcasts. And stay tuned for the next episode, the final episode before the October 4th premiere of Season 2 Holiday Special. Thank you for going beyond Geek by Night with us. See you next time.